bishop c4 on the board. So we might be seeing the same Italian line.
All right, so c3 played. This is exactly what happened in deviation at some point. What is it going to be? So this is all following what we've seen so far, Peter.
Yeah, but it also could be easily that Magnus will deviate, yeah? No, okay, Wesley deviates with h3, so that's
h3. So let's just tell everyone what happened in game one. Instead of h3, there was this move queen c2 which was played, and after knight e6 being played in that one, and this did not happen this time. So instead of queen c2, Wesley and his team come up with the idea of h3, kicking out that bishop first, forcing it to h5.
Rook c1 is the first new move because to be fair, when first time this line appeared, I think it was kind of common knowledge and everybody included h3, the move queen b3. Here in fact it turned out that black has the move knight a5, I think. And this is very, very important because here we see the big difference that after queen takes d5, suddenly with the bishop on e4, but after knight takes e4, rook a d8, you actually trap white's queen in the center of the board. They were doing immediately without the inclusion h3, bishop f5. So that's how all this line developed, because here line kind of got abandoned and it didn't really get any attention. And suddenly Wesley comes up and, okay, I don't know, first of all, the move cannot be objectively really good, because if it would be so good, then Wesley would have already used it in his very first game. But maybe my situation will be desperate, then exactly with this move I'm planning to disbalance Magnus, just as Radjavov has done in that Ragozin, where he came up with this h4, a5, rook h4 line, which objectively also doesn't promise white anything. In fact, maybe even white is risking something if black knows. But if black does not know...
He is still thinking about that game one. We saw him just slightly unhappy with the way things are right now, shaking his head. So far, rook c1 played. I think in game one, the position he got out of the opening was part of his big mess up on his side, allowing Magnus that attack and losing that game one. Definitely the worst kind of start that Wesley could have expected, especially using his key preparation. Very interesting what you point out, that rook 5 suddenly becomes a reality, although even attacking the e5 pawn, the pressure is on, and I think far from over in the calculation. But for making sure the knight on c3 is tied down, can't go to d5. So the main idea in these structures for black is always to get f6 one way or the other. And I have a feeling that now is the right time for white to go short castle, once again renew the idea of taking on d5. And after short castle, I am expecting a trade on c3, not allowing the white rook to have an open c line, and then eventually f6.
Yes, castle played, yeah, f6. I mean, it all depends on this f, but I don't know exactly. I mean, now f6 doesn't seem to be so good. Yeah, because this is another very important strategical moment from white's play. Yeah, like for example, after g4, maybe first reaction is like, oh my God, what is g4? Why is white weakening his king? It's very important to get rid of this against my king, but I just go knight e5. And next I'm going to go f3, kicking this knight away. And we again see one of those positions that white actually wants to get in this structure, like kicking the knight away. It might be unpleasant. So yeah, and Magnus is not going f6, he goes knight a5. Black wants to set up the blockade with c6, b5, knight c4, rely on this spin, and be ready for every action that white is trying to use on the king side. So a super exciting position. I mean, we got a real game. That's the very good news for us.
I think Wesley needs to use this opportunity that you're talking about. He needs to go G with f6 or go for this knight c4 idea. I am predicting g4 from Wesley. It's time for him to, and he goes for it, Peter. White for Wesley. The fourth game is after that, so we fixed the scores under the players. Now bishop g6 played.
Hey, first the move king g2. It's not entirely clear to me, because if you play knight e1, one of the moves that bothered me a bit was f6. Because now the desired move like f3 maybe can be answered by knight g6, but no, back why I was also not such a huge fan of king g2, that I wasn't really sure that on long terms my king is really so much better on g2 than on g1, and after all it costs a tempo. So knight e1 on the board, and I feel like, you know, okay, black has to somehow justify, I mean, he has to, then white will be super happy getting that extra tempo with knight g2, kicking the queen back, plus then already f3 might trap the knight on e4. So queen h4 looks like a nice attacking move, but in fact might lose a lot of tempists for black. Unfortunate, and he goes for f6. Yeah, he doesn't want to touch the
f3 is screaming to be played. Peter, let's take a look at that, because if white trades on f6, that solves all of black's problem. If white goes f4, black's f6 is super successful. I'm expecting Wesley, good or bad, to play the move f3 here.
Yeah, FC is kind of expected. Now I'm also thinking that can actually black be super clever and then try to play c6 here. Yeah, FC on the board.
On the board, Wesley bites the bullet. He says he's ready for it, ready for all the action, because that's what he needs with the white pieces right now.
Both is a messy position. It's a type of position where Magnus is disbalanced. It's not like he can rely on any of his routines or whatever. I mean, it's a very, very concrete, direct position. Lot of pressure on Magnus now.
Peter, let's take a look at some lines, because this is such a critical moment, and Magnus down to 6 minutes on his clock. He can't take too long, because the action, regardless, white is doing well here. c6 first, big question, where does the bishop go to? I don't want to come back to e2 because of knight g3. Let's take a look at bishop d3 and what happens. What's the follow-up after bishop d3?
Yeah, and Magnus has actually opted for c6. I think it was kind of the justification that if you already played for this f6 line, then he wants to follow it up with c6. It spices that black will be able to trade down the light squared bishops immediately.
Okay, so knight light squared bishop, where is this knight on g3 escaping to? And the answer to that is nowhere. So you don't want to take chances with that. Knight g5 played, and now...
Yes, but those type of positions are super tricky, because actually black solves lot of problems.
Take a look at this pawn structure, Peter, because I don't think we get the chance to actually look at such a pawn structure where there are 4 pawns on the same line, on the G line, 3 black pawns, a triple decker here. But like you were mentioning, that black has his own trumps after ruining his pawn structure.
Exactly. The point is that also white's knight will lack any good square. It's just impossible. There are also big... Taking a closer look, it doesn't look appealing at all for white. The big question is like, which piece do you want to trade? Yeah, which piece do you want to trade? When do you want to go f4? Because after all, white could even now maybe go for f4 just as before, but of course situation has changed now. For example, after f4 and we are seeing this pawn structure. Wow,
amazing. Peter, absolutely what you were pointing out in the other line, huge difference from what we saw after the bishop trade. In that position, white would have had f5 as it. Here f5, there's no bishop on g6, so white doesn't really have that kind of time. So instead, Wesley gives Magnus the worst pawn structure that we've seen in the FTX Crypto Cup so far.
Yeah, but it's also very, very interesting to understand what Wesley is thinking. Yeah, because knight c4. Wow, Magnus felt that, you know, going knight c4 immediately, giving the g6 pawn. Magnus felt that he doesn't have the right to lose tempo for this move. Interesting. I mean, I'm still not exactly understanding why. I still don't entirely understand why this is so critical, but in time to break with f4, and one thing you don't want to do is let white's knight be activated, yeah? For example, g5, maybe even something like knight g6 on g6. There are even lines like you go queen e6, I might follow it up with rook f5. You cannot take on g6 because of rook f8 check. And then I'm starting to take on g5, go rook h5 and invade and mate. So Magnus gives up the pawn, but this is then a full pawn. So it's not about we are not talking.
Still maintains the pressure. I really like after queen g6, queen e7, his move rook f2. The idea is simple. You want to free up your knight on e1. You want to start jumping around with it. Either earlier, because black had this idea of knight d2, which would hit the rook on f1 and the pawn on f3. So first, a prophylactic move, preparing to get ready to jump with the knight and bring it into the game.
Yeah, and now there is nothing else to do for Magnus. Yeah, like, okay, I lost a pawn, now I want to try to pretend that things are... And I have to say that whenever, you know, somebody makes a draw like Magnus has done in the second game, I'm very, very happy that in the next game, the white player gets a chance, yeah, because this is exactly the way how we want to discourage those decisions that whenever black feels like, I mean, whenever the player who won with the black pieces that says like, okay, now I want what we should be very, very happy about, that we got a very, very exciting match again. Knight G2, Rook A8 and Rook CF1. I actually love this move a lot. I really love this move because white is getting ready to break with F4 and then the Rook, yeah, Rook C6 had to be played. The Queen had to be kicked away. But this is bad news for Magnus. I mean, it's not only that it looks bad, it might be also that practically it's just so easy for Wesley. He has a clear plan and it's the right way to go with F4. Rook A6, very clever by Magnus. He doesn't want to give breath. Runs into Rook A3. It might be that it's still okay for white, but definitely you need to calculate a lot because black will be hitting the pawn on H3, and unless you see exactly that by force you are doing very well, you don't want to give such chance.
Peter, I just mentioned in chat that I'm actually expecting Wesley to win this one. He's got this extra pawn bit, and look at that eval bar. It does seem to say that white has got this huge advantage. And the only thing that in that rare position of game 4, how white set it up and in the end finished it off the moment he opened the F file. And this is the same pattern that we're seeing here from Wesley's side.
One here, so that after Rook A3 you will be ready to play Rook B3. And it's again a very, very typical natural way of, you know, rerouting your rook. And then you can ask me, why was I so euphoric about Rook C1 to F1 before? But a lot of things has changed, yeah, because after Rook like took on D4, I know that my opponent already took. I'm coming back with the Queen. Now black is leaving the C file. He's going Rook A6. And then the move like Rook B1, just preventing all these ideas on the Queen side, make a lot of sense. But definitely one of the things for this Queen.
And Peter, we are being a lot of chat mentioning that F4 seems to be the move that the engine is recommending. So maybe let's take a look at that.
Yeah, you go back to G6. And now the point is that after the move Rook takes H3, probably you can just take on G5. F6 might be winning there, but okay. Anyway, F4 on the board, we might be seeing all these lines. F4, Rook A3, Queen G6, blitzed out.
Wow, chat. So F4 played and Rook A3, Queen G6. Peter, Rook H3, you definitely don't want that. Even if F6 is a possibility, I think this line should not work for white. So after Rook H3,
white is not winning here, but the point is that after F5, I'm also not sure if, but okay, otherwise F5 anyway has this terrible F6 threat. Yeah, Magnus going for Rook takes H3, so we might be seeing F5 or F take G5, one of these two moves.
In the beginning, I just thought simply take on G5 and you've got control of the F file. You've got Rook F2, E6 maybe coming in with ideas of Rook F7. Knight might be difficult to deal with it. Knight E3 you're mentioning at the moment. And does this give white, does this mean that white would be forced G5?
Then Queen G5, yeah. Queen D3, Queen G5, and okay, maybe you have Rook E2. I don't know, but it already looks strange. Wesley going for F5. I mean, it's a very principled move. I mean, humanly, this is very nice because you have this wonderful pawn structure and you don't structure with F6, making sure that you use your two rooks on the F file with incredible force. And let's not forget that in the very first game when Magnus won with the black pieces, he won thanks to these two rooks now as well to checkmate black.
And chat informing us, Peter, that F5 is the way to go. Now, Rook H6 was the scary thing the first moment you look at it, but I think this, you just go slightly deeper in that position. And actually after Rook H6, F6, it's black who's in big trouble. Because take a look at this. If black picks up the queen on G6, white takes Fe7, and you can't really stop the E7 pawn from promoting. Take white's queen on G6. On the other hand, if after F6, you simply move your queen away, let's say to D7 or to C7, amongst other options, Queen G5 looks like the simplest way to continue in that position. So Rook H6 is not possible after F5.
Actually, if white gets F6 in, it's just winning. So I'm wondering, can black take on E5, Queen E5 with some counterplay?
But Queen E6, you just trade the queens immediately, no?
Yes, yeah, no, of course.
Maybe you have a lot of pawns.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, no, if by Magnus then F6, I mean, why isn't white just crushing through? it looks like white is crushing.
Wow. Okay, so f6, ef6. So this
Yeah, he just blundered it completely. He just blundered
it was
it.
lost.